Good evening and welcome to the October 26, 2020 meeting of the Auburn Board of Selectmen. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Board of Selectmen is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, please call 1-408-650-3123 and enter access code 235-235-861. Or you can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/2352358661. As a preliminary matter, this is Doreen Goodrich, Chair of the Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Lionel Berthiaume?
Yes.
Dan Carpenter? Dan Carpenter?
I did say here, but maybe I didn't say it loud enough. Sorry.
Thank you. Tristan LaLiberty?
Yes.
Scott Rand?
Present.
And town officials and employees participating, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Town Manager Julie Jacobson?
Yes.
Assistant Town Manager CFO Ed Rich?
Yes.
And Administrative Assistant Sharon Kwiatkowski.
Yes.
Please note that this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. And also note that each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. If you are not speaking, please keep your microphones muted so that we do not get any interference. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll move on to the agenda. The first meeting is public hearings and presentations. We have a presentation on the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. I'm going to turn it over to Town Manager Julie Jacobson to make introductions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, through the chair and the members of the board. Thanks for the opportunity for us to have our consultants present this plan to you. As you know, this is a plan that we've been working on for nearly a year. We probably started early in the beginning of 2020. It was very challenging for the consultants to get this work done because a lot of it most of it actually took place once COVID hit in mid-March. So it did make it a little challenging to evaluate our sites and our facilities and all of our playgrounds and parks and buildings. But the plan is done and it's been submitted to the state. And we wanted to provide the opportunity for the consultants to just give an overview for you and the public as to what this plan is. And just as a reminder, this was one of the goals that you had established for me for 2020. So I felt it was important to make sure that you understood how this plan works. It's a massive document. It's over 300 pages long. It's available on our website. But I want to turn it over to our consultants who are just going to go through, 10 to 15 minute presentation on what it is, answer any of your questions. So we have Anna Julian, who's the Senior Project Manager, and David West, who's the ADA Information Specialist and our Accessibility Surveyor. Both of this plan was done through the CMRPC, and Connor Robichaud, who could not be here from CMRPC, but had helped us coordinate this grant that we received from the state to do this project. And we ran the grant through the CMRPC. So it's been a great partnership with CMRPC. So I just want to acknowledge them, even though Connor's not here tonight. So I'm actually classified as the presenter. Amanda may be the presenter. So as the Anna and David, you can unmute, and I'm going to mute. And then just tell me when you want me to hit next, and I'll go to the next slide.
Hey, Julie, thank you. And thank you for having us tonight. I think we can move forward. Julie, next.
Just give me 1 minute to make sure. Let's see. Here we go.
Okay. So just a quick overview about the Institute for Human-Centered Design. We are a 40-year-old international education and design nonprofit dedicated to enhancing the experiences of people of all ages, abilities, and cultures through excellence in design. Next, please. Our scope of work includes education and training on accessibility and universal design. We provide technical assistance under the Americans with Disabilities Act. We are home to the New England ADA Center, which is one of 10 centers around the country providing information and guidance under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we provide consulting, design services, and research with contextual inquiry and user experts. Next. Our scope of work with the town of Auburn included the evaluation of programs, services, and activities, the evaluation of facilities, and the ADA self-evaluation. Next. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the Title II, which applies to the town of Auburn, requires that the town do not discriminate against people with disabilities in their programs, services, and activities. So the state and local government or the town of Auburn must take steps to examine their programs and establish a plan for compliance with the law. Next. Next. So the policies and the policies report was, we developed that report together with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, the CMRPC. And the information was obtained by an online questionnaire developed by us and submitted by 13 departments, and also information from the website. So one of the first requirements under the ADA is the responsibility to have a designated employee. The town of Auburn has met its obligation by designating the building commissioner as the town ADA coordinator and the director of facilities and maintenance as the ADA officer for the schools. The ADA also requires a grievance procedures. The town does have a grievance procedure, but we recommended that clarify the grievance by distributing it to all department heads and also post copies in each of the town's public buildings. Next. Another requirement of the ADA is the notice. The town is required to let members of the public know that the town does not discriminate on the basis of disabilities. So the town does have a notice on its website in 3 different locations. What we recommended is to have it in a more prominent place on the town's website homepage, and also to post the notice in public locations in the town's buildings. Next.
Sorry, hold on.
That's fine.
There we go.
Okay. Another requirement of the ADA is the modification of policies, practices, and procedures. We recommended that the town take additional steps to provide information to members of the public that they can request a modification of the town's policies, and also to provide a form for requesting the modification, and make the commitment that the town will provide the form on accessible format upon request. Next. Another requirement of the ADA is the reasonable accommodation for town employees. IHCD found no evidence that Auburn has failed to provide a reasonable accommodation when requested. And finally, effective communication. We recommended to clarify the procedures of providing effective communication. The town has to make sure that communication with people with disabilities is as effective as communication with people without disabilities. So we also recommended that the town provide make sure that the website and any web-based program that they have be made accessible. For that, we provided a report with the major accessibility issues. The facility surveyed, we included 10 public buildings and 5 public schools and the playgrounds and 11 parks and outdoor areas. Next. The basis for the self-evaluation, we surveyed buildings for compliance with the 2010 standards for accessible design, the ADA, and also for compliance with the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board. We reviewed for compliance with both and provided recommendations based on the standards that provide more accessibility. Next. For each building that was surveyed, we provided a building report, which include the basic information about the building, key accessibility issues, and the order of magnitude cost estimates. Next. Together with the building report, we provided a building catalog, which is a database of records of each building element that is not compliant with the ADA or the state code. And each record includes a photograph, the floor and location information, element and element type, the list of issues with measurements if applicable, possible remedies, and cost estimate when applicable. And now I'm going to let David go over the review of the facilities.
Thank you, Anna. Can everyone hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. I apologize. I turned off my camera. I'm getting a message that there may be bandwidth issues, and so I'm hoping by shutting off the camera part of it, things will go more smoothly. In terms of strategies for facilities trying to provide access, there are 3 key strategies we like to stress. You can relocate a program, service, or activity within a facility that may not be accessible to a location in the same building where there would be an accessible route to the program. You can relocate programs, services, and activities to another facility that is accessible, or you can renovate a facility to ensure access to programs, services, and activities. Next. Looking now at Town Hall, here's some photographs of issues that we spotted in that building. The key thing actually that I want to draw attention to here is in the bottom right, in the Selectmen's meeting room. You can see that in approaching the dais, there's no accessible route there. So an individual with a mobility disability, or certainly someone using a wheeled mobility device, wouldn't be able to take part from that part of the room, and that's something that should be remedied. Next. Looking at the police department, there are a couple things I want to point out here. First, in the top left, in the community room, there's a sink that that is part of that kitchenette that is used by members of the public, and it lacks knee and toe clearance for a forward approach. The second image showing the lavatory, the key things we noted there is that the pipes below the lavatory, below the sink, are not wrapped. An individual who is paralyzed or otherwise doesn't have feelings in their legs, they can burn their legs on pipes like that if hot water is going through them and not be aware of it. A very simple remedy, and it's not particularly expensive, is to wrap the pipes, and that's what we would recommend. Looking at the third image in the top row, that's in a holding cell at the police department, and that toilet and lavatory combo there is not accessible. Doesn't have grab bars, and it's part of a number of issues that we noticed in some of the holding cells. And then the other key thing I think I'd like to point out on this page is in the bottom row in the middle. That's the accessible egress at the police department leading directly outside. So Massachusetts Architectural Access Board would require an illuminated international symbol of accessibility, the wheelchair symbol, up by the exit sign. And we would also want on the lat side of the door, tactile egress signage, so someone with low vision would be able to tell that they were at the egress door. Next slide, please. So looking at key recommendations for building and facilities, you always want to be sure that there's an accessible route from all arrival points to the areas in the building where program services and activities are provided. When parking is provided, you want to be sure that it includes proper accessible parking, and I think I'll have a bit more to say about that later. When toilet rooms are provided in a building and made available to the public, you need to ensure that there are fully accessible toilet facilities, and you want to be sure that there's compliant signage, both designation like for permanent rooms, and also a very important egress signage. Continuing with key recommendations for building and facilities, we are going to mention a couple times in this presentation things that your town did extremely well. In rooms where audible communications are integral to the use of a space, it's important to provide compliant assistive listening systems, to have those available and to have a sign so that people know that they could be available. We'll talk a bit about the high school in the moment. From what I remember, almost, if not literally, every classroom had assistive listening systems, and that's really outstanding. Here's some images from the high school. Some things I'd like to draw your attention to are the second slide in the top row. That defibrillator is what's called a protruding object. It protrudes into the interior accessible route. Because it's higher than 27 inches or doesn't have something below it at 27 inches and lower, an individual with a cane wouldn't be able to detect that, and they could run into that and injure themselves. Also in the bottom left, looking at the bleacher seating, the issue there is that there's no companion seating for an individual with a wheelchair to be able to sit by his or her friends. And moving all the way to the bottom right, the lavatories, as we call them, that sink design that we saw in a number of the toilet rooms in the high school doesn't have the 27-inch minimum needed knee clearance. And from what I remember, the mirror was higher than allowed. You don't want the reflective surface of the mirror to be any higher than the bottom of it to be any higher than 40 inches. Some things to point out here. Again, the sink on the right in the top row doesn't have wrap pipes, and it also has faucet controls that require tight grasping, pinching, and twisting of the wrist. We want to have controls that you could operate with a closed fist. The parking in the top left lacks an access aisle and a sign. And the key thing, other remaining image here is this drinking fountain. That's a fountain for a seated user. You always have to have the fountains in sort of dual. You have to have both a seated fountain and a standing fountain. So again, looking at key recommendations for schools, in any unique room, like a nurse's room, you want to ensure that there's a fully accessible toilet room if a toilet room is provided. We talked a bit about the sinks, and I have some images, though I didn't really point to them, about accessible work surfaces. You need to be sure in each unique classroom or one classroom per grade that you have a work surface that has 27-inch knee clearance and can be used by somebody who is using a wheeled mobility device. Next, please. Now looking at some things with outdoor areas, the image in the top left is very important. That's a playground, and the surface inside the playground is what's called engineered wood fiber. The Massachusetts Architectural Access Board does not consider that an accessible surface, and you need to have an accessible surface connecting all the play elements within the playground, and we typically recommend poured-in-place rubber. You also need an accessible route around the outside of the playground, and grass is not considered an accessible route. And then, of course, with the playground, the picnic table, the bike rack, and in the bottom right, the bleachers, you need an and the monument, I apologize, in the center bottom, you need an accessible route to all of those elements. Next slide, please. Looking at some more issues with the outdoor area, the center top photo, the sink and the lavatory, and the trash can block the maneuvering clearance at the door. We're on the pull side of the door. And if you just imagine a person there with a wheelchair trying to get out, the wheelchair itself would block their ability to exit. if the sink and trash can weren't there, they would have hopefully at least the 18 inches minimum required on the pull side, so they could get themselves and their chair a little bit out of the way, get the door open, and get outside. The other images on the bottom show a service counter that is too high. You want to have a 36-inch accessible portion of any service counter. And then again, the baseball field and the basketball are not on an accessible route. Thank you. So key recommendations for outdoor areas. We want always to ensure that there's an accessible route to all elements in the park or outdoor space, the baseball fields, basketball courts, and so on, bleacher seating that we were talking about. And it's also important to ensure there's clear floor space adjacent to the bench at team seating. So if, let's say there's an individual with a wheeled mobility device that either plays with or in some way assists the baseball team, for example, at a dugout, you want to be sure there's clear floor space for that person and clear floor space at bleacher seating. We saw many, many good examples in Auburn. In fact, your high school and middle school had accessibility features that we thought were among the best of anything we'd seen. And we look at public and private schools, we look at public and private universities, and there were some really outstanding things, some of which I'll point out here. Top left is a bench or basically a work surface in a lab that has knee and toe clearance. Same thing with the sink in the second photo on the top. Adjustable height tables in the computer lab are outstanding. On the top right, the conversation window at the end of the photo by the wall clock has a lower speaking area that's accessible for people who are short stature in a wheeled mobility device. Really like seeing on the bottom left numerous accessible picnic tables in an area where kids might go outside to eat their lunch. This means that a kid who's in a wheeled mobility device doesn't always have to sit at the same place every day. They can mix around with different groups just like all the other kids get to do. Outstanding to see an accessible lift to the press box, and that all of the windows, observation points in the press box were accessible, not just one. And then finally, the last two images show accessible seating at bleachers and the accessible space at the team seating. Among the materials that we provided were the self-evaluation report, and then very importantly, the transition plan database, which is an Excel spreadsheet, and it's not locked. It's a working document that you can sort and keep track of your progress in dealing with accessibility issues and use as part of budgeting and planning as you decide what sorts of things you can take care of quickly and what things may be capital expenses and so forth. So again, goals of the self-evaluation is that overall is that all of the town's program services and activities, when viewed in their entirety, are readily accessible and usable to people with disabilities. You have the priority goal of ensuring program access with the objective of equal participation of people with disabilities. All of this, particularly with the transition plan spreadsheet, can be implemented into the town's planning and budget. And the overall goal is that all residents, regardless of ability, feel that they know about and can participate in all that the town of Auburn has to offer. Next. We have some trainings we could make available to any groups or sets of people that may be interested. We can provide additional training on Title II of the ADA, the title that applies to cities and towns. And we can also provide some training on effective communication if that would be helpful. Thank you. And now both Anna and I would be happy to answer questions now or whenever is convenient if you have some, or you can reach out to us by email or phone afterwards as well. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
both.
Julie,
I
go ahead.
Board and see if any members had questions of us through the chair. And also just to let the board know, so as you can tell from the plan that we had given you the links to, there are many, many upgrades and improvements that we could make from an ADA perspective. So Ed and I have talked about this, and we are going to start incorporating some measures to implement this plan over the next few years in our annual budgets. Small pieces at a time and hitting the priorities first. We do have a grant application into the state right now through Boyle and his office to put new base coverings on the 3 of the playgrounds. That was a fairly expensive upgrade. I think our grant application is about $220,000. So we already have that grant application in. Hopefully some or all of it would be funded. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that eye-opening and thorough presentation. Boy, you don't realize how much work we have to do until we take a real close look at it. Do any members have any comments or questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Berthew.
Couple of questions or thoughts that I had while watching that was, or concern, has the ADA, have the rules changed that much since the building of the Auburn High School? Being that there are several areas in the high school and being that the building is still pretty new, wouldn't those things have been taken care of by the builder at the time, or is that something that we can get them back to conform, or have the ADA policies changed since the building of that?
Do you want to ask both questions, or do you want to take them separately, Mr. Berthew?
No, that's the main concern that I have. I don't think there was anything in the middle school that was just built. And I think as far as the playgrounds that were built recently, those were probably more our choices to put whatever materials we use. So it's more just, when we're building buildings, again, I feel like the high school is a pretty new building, so it concerns me that we're looking at something that needs to be fixed or changed or upgraded, and maybe those things don't need to be upgraded. Maybe when we put that building in, we allowed that there's other areas that are accessible, that those things don't need to be changed. And I guess that's my question is, do we have any way of not spending money on the high school, which, and not to not spend it, but, can we go back on the people that built it if they weren't built to code?
Mrs. Jacobson, if you want to take that, I don't recall what year the high school was built, and through you, if you can, if anyone here can answer, Mr. Berthew wants to know if the regulations have changed.
Yeah, and I can tell you that some of these recommendations to the whole board, some of these recommendations are recommendations for improvements, not necessarily required recommendations. So there's a difference between recommending items to be upgraded to enhance the accessibility versus what's required under the code. So, but to answer your more specific questions, I would turn to David or Anna to see if there have been any changes. Again, the building is probably some 15 years old, maybe at this point, 17 years old.
Do either one of our presenters want to take that?
David, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I apologize again. I think my camera is back off. I'm having some warnings about my connection. But one thing I would say is that in all the buildings I've surveyed, and I imagine this is almost always the case with Anna, I've never seen a building that didn't have a single issue. And it's not really necessarily the case that the architects or the builders or the other folks that worked at your school, particularly the high school that was so good, that if we noticed some things that, they really necessarily did a bad job. As to whether you can push them to correct it, I guess you'll have to determine that. And while we're talking, I'll see if I can find the high school report and let you know the year it was built. But our main impression of multiple schools in Auburn was really how well you had done. Obviously, you do want to try to correct the things we highlighted, but particularly with the schools, I think your perspective should be really noticing what a good job the members of your town and the folks that you hired did. And as to updates in the code, Anna, do you have anything you'd want to add there?
Yeah, no, I don't think it has been too much change in the code, but as I mentioned, we look at buildings for compliance with both the ADA and the state. So in many instances, things here in Massachusetts, they are built only with the states in mind, with the state requirements. So that's probably why you saw a few things that were not in compliance, but those are very easy fixed. Like, for instance, the lavatories that David showed in the toilet rooms is just to remove the panel or to move it back to the close to the door, to the wall, so you will have your knee clearance, or removing those protruding objects that were protruding into the circulation route. So those are very easy fix. We didn't really see major accessibility issues. It was things that can be done very easily.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Carpenter.
the high school opened in 2006. We laid the cornerstone in 2004.
Thank you for that.
So it was in compliance with the previous, the 1991 ADA standards.
Thank you. Mr. Bertram, do you have anything else on that?
So just, I guess, on that, when things are getting considered, I think it would be good for us to know whether it is, number one, something that is definitely out of code that needs to be brought up to code. Number two, if it's something that, doesn't have to be done, but it would be nice to be done. And also, number three, if we have an instance where, we have a maybe a disabled person that is inquiring to get something done, obviously, I think that's going to be our priority. So when we prioritize these things, and obviously, if we can go for grants, that's awesome. And certainly, our town, I think, is one of the best at going for grants. So I have no doubt that you'll go for everything that you possibly can. But just to make sure that we prioritize these correctly. But it was a great presentation, and I thank you folks for that. And just like I say, my concern is not to spend money where if there's already other accessible areas in the building, or unless there's specific for somebody that requests, an individual requests something specific, just to be careful where we're spending that extra money. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bertram. Does anyone else have anything?
I guess I would say just quickly, my memory from the schools is the greatest individual expense may be in addressing the engineered wood fiber at playground surfaces. The port-in-place rubber, unfortunately, is quite expensive, although it results in a great surface that really allows the elements in the playground to be accessed by everyone. But that the overall expenses at the high school, given the range of things we looked at, as Anna said, particularly at the high school, most of the things, except for that issue with engineered wood fiber, were relatively minor in terms of cost.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else? Mrs. Jacobson, do you have anything else in closing?
In closing, I just want to thank again the consultants. They did a tremendous job, and all the department heads that were involved in this. As you can tell, this is really comprehensive. This involved every aspect of our municipal government as well as our school side of government, and on the school side, they were extremely cooperative, helpful to us. So we want to thank you both. And to Mr. Bertham's questions, yes, the the prioritization plan really does take into account those things that have to be done versus those things that would be nice to be done but aren't required. So that's what we're focusing on. Although I would say the most expensive things to be done were the playgrounds, which is why we applied for that as a grant, because we did feel that that would service the might need that kind of thing. So absolutely, we're going to keep that in mind as we move forward and try to allocate some funds every year toward making some of these upgrades. Maybe do the low-hanging fruit things first that aren't that expensive, and then focus on the larger things for some grant opportunities. So thank you. Thank you both.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
And yeah, the last thing I'd like to say is just also, I know all the surveyors, Anna and myself, we really enjoyed everyone we worked with in Auburn. The attitude was always, you know, what could you guys do to help us to be able to get our work done? And we were very, very supportive, and that's not always the case. So it was nice to encounter so many people who were trying to help us out. So thank all of you for that.
And I would like to add also that we were contacted by the person responsible at the schools, and I know that he already started to do a few things that were easy fix. He already started to do that. So that's a good.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome.
Okay. We're going to move on with the agenda. And please, you're welcome to stay, but don't feel that you have to. It's just regular town stuff we're moving on to. Next, we have communications, and the two do tie together. We have a letter from the town planner on the planning board's public hearing and recommendation for the proposed map bylaw amendment on the October 27th special town meeting warrant. And you'll see in your packet that the planning board had voted 3-2 not to recommend approval of the warrant article. So following that, under communications B, we have a letter from the petitioner to the moderator requesting to withdraw Article 14 on the October 27th, 2020 special town meeting warrant. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that they're withdrawing this until they can get a little more support. Is there any comment or questions on those two correspondence? Seeing none, we will move on then. Thank you. Under Board of Selectmen general items, which actually ties into the two above, we have a discussion and potential vote on Article 14, which has now been withdrawn, so there's no need to take action. We have under 4B, we have a note to approve bond anticipation note, the ban borrowing of $5,985,000 dated November 6, 2020 and due on November 5th, 2021. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kazanovich to give us a brief summary on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to briefly describe what's included in this note sale. We currently have roughly $3.5 million of existing notes that are coming due on the 6th. And that's comprised of the following: about $645,000 of FY20 school equipment and building rehab. We have town miscellaneous equipment of about $82,000. We have $2.2 million in short-term notes for a bypass sewer line on Route 20. About just shy of $98,000 for LED streetlight project, and about a $500,000 existing ban for the Auburn street reconstruction project. A project totaling $1.2 million of local funds, and there is some state and federal money. And I think that's about a $4.6 million project, Mr. Quill. I see you on the dashboard. Roughly about that amount of money. In addition to that, we're going out for $1.480 million of new money consisting of the following: $450,000 of school equipment and building rehab, a leftover amount from FY20 for school equipment and building rehab of $20,000. So there's a $10,000 item for park bleachers, an additional $300,000 to replace the sewer main on Bancroft Street under the bridge, and the Auburn Street reconstruction project, we're going out for an additional $700,000 that would complete our $1.2 million obligation. That project is expected to commence this spring and continue through the fall, which gives us a total band sale of $5,004,985. We went out for bid last Friday on 10/23, and we received some fantastic rates. We are going to split this issue, $2 million going to Hometown Bank at a rate of 0.55. That's a little over 0.5% for these short-term notes. That's a fantastic rate. And Century Bank with the balance of $3,004,985 at a rate of 0.59. So I've never seen the rates this low. I can recall when we received short-term rates just under 1%. We thought that was historic, never going to see anything lower than that. Well, I guess I was wrong about that. But anyway, these notes are dated November 6th, and they will mature roughly a year later on November 5th of 2021. This is kind of unique. We've never had a signing of notes remotely. So you physically can't sign the notes tonight. We talked to bond counsel. You can take the vote tonight. We will need each and every one of you to come into the clerk's office at some point tomorrow if you can. Sign these notes where they can be witnessed by the town clerk. We'll work around your schedule as best we can. If you could either call the clerk's office or call Sharon so we can coordinate that with the staff, so we can get you in and out and get those notes signed tomorrow. Any other questions, Madam Chair? I'd be happy to answer them right now.
Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich. Do members have any questions or comments on this item?
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry, who was that?
Lionel.
Oh, Lionel. Hi, sorry about that. Mr. Berthium, go ahead.
My question is, when we take out these bond notes, do we make monthly payments toward those, paying the interest, or do we just pay the entire thing off next year when the note becomes due, and with the added interest?
Mr. Kazanovich.
Great question. Great question to the chair. Lionel, we will pay one payment on the maturity date for the interest for that band. So roughly 0.5% of $5 million will be due on maturity date. Subsequent to that, when we go out and we roll these short-term notes into a long-term borrowing, it's normally structured in such a way where we make one principal payment, or we retire a portion of debt each year, with 2 interest payments made in 6-month increments. So we'll have 1 debt payment, 2 interest payments once we convert this over to a long-term borrowing.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, this has to be specific language in the motion. Sharon did email us the completed motion with the figures in the motion earlier today. If someone who has the motion that was emailed today could please make that motion.
I'll make a motion that the sale of the $5,004,985 bond anticipation note dated November 6th, 2020, known as the note, to Hometown Bank at the price of $2 million bearing an interest rate of 0.55%, and to Century Bank and Trust Company at the price of $3,004,985, bearing an interest rate of 0.59%, to approve and confirm that.
Is there a
The note
second?
shall be, I just have to,
sorry.
the note shall be payable on November 5th, 2021.
I'll second.
Mr. Berthium has made the motion. Mr. Wren has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? This will be a roll call vote. Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. LaLiberte?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, everyone, and please connect with either Sharon or the town clerk to sign these documents tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich.
Thank you.
The next item we have is a vote to set the tax classification hearing on Monday, November 9th at 6:10 p.m. I do see that Mr. Woodlard is on the call, but I'm going to turn to Mrs. Jacobson to discuss this.
Through the chair, thank you very much. So I would actually turn to Ed Kazanovich to answer this, but we are proposing that you vote for your tax classification hearing on November 9th. We are recommending 6:10 p.m. for the start of the hearing. We know we're starting your meeting at 6, so we thought that would be a good time to start. And I want to acknowledge and thank our assessor, Seth Woolard, who's here this evening. And if there are any questions that you had for Seth tonight, that's why he's here. And, you know, we can, if there's anything specific you're looking for to help you, if you wanted to raise that tonight, at least we could be aware of it and be prepared for the for when you do have the hearing. Ed, is there anything you wanted to add?
So typically, this is when we ask the board to consider the tax classification factor. It's normally mid-November. Certainly, we have to wait till the conclusion of town meeting to determine, the impact of those factors. We're expecting approval of the warrant articles to be presented tomorrow evening. That kind of sets the stage for the classification hearing. And we're opting to do it a little earlier than we have in the past. Our chief assessor retired back in April, and we'd like to give Seth and his crew an opportunity and some time to work their way through the process. Seth has done a fantastic job up until now. Our values have been certified. We're ready to go. I'd just like to give them a little time to work through the billing aspect of the outcome of the classification hearing, just to give them enough time to prepare and feel comfortable about working through the process.
Are there any member comments or questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Carpenter?
I just wanted to, I had emailed the manager earlier, and I know she's looking into it, but I just wanted to mention to the board that I had asked if there was any sort of average or median commercial industrial rate that be included in the packet. So it's an open question as to whether such a thing exists, because of so many communities don't have split tax rates. So I don't know if anybody else thinks that that's of value or not, but I just wanted to let the board know as well.
Great.
To the chair, if I may too, I did try to find that information this afternoon. Mr. Carpenter, I'm not finding it. I've been on the DLS Gateway website as well as the Municipal Data Bank, and I've found several charts and graphs and databases that they have. I have not come across anything like that yet, but I'll look again, but I'm pretty sure I've gone through all of their databases.
Is there anything else on this item? If not, I'll entertain. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Through you to Mr. Woodland, I just wanted to ask if you could include, I know we're doing it a little bit earlier, but any other towns, if they've already voted, what they've set their rates at for the coming fiscal year and what their average or median tax payments would be. If you could just include that in the packet, that would be helpful. Thanks.
You can do that.
Is there anything further? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to set the tax classification hearing for Monday, November 9th at 6:10 p.m.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Liberty. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Berthium, by a roll call vote. Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. And I see that Mr. Coyle is still on the call, so I would entertain a motion to move up agenda items 5B and 5C.
So
So
moved.
moved.
There's a motion and a second on the floor by a roll call vote. Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we are on agenda item 5B, a vote to authorize, accept, and expend grant funds from the Mass DOT Complete Streets Funding Program. Mrs. Jacobson, since it's a town manager item, I will turn to you first.
Great, thank you. And I want to thank Mr. Coyle for being here this evening. So, and he can explain this, but just by way of background, if you recall, the board had supported us moving forward to get the complete street designation that DPW spent a lot of time working on. That was almost a year project, and they did get that designation. And with that designation, we're now allowed to apply for funding through the complete street. So that being said, I'll just turn it over to Bill Coyle to explain it all.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Madam Chair, members of the board, as you may recall, the past couple of years, we've been working on our Complete Streets program. We've completed Tier 1, which is basically the Complete Streets training and policy development, and also Tier 2, which is developing our prioritization plan. And all of that is necessary in order for us to be able to move forward. Those two steps have been approved. So we can now move forward and request actual construction projects through Mass DOT. So we are prioritizing, our number one priority was the funding of providing, which is perfect for tonight's meeting, I guess, is handicap accessible ramps at all our crosswalks. Over the years, there's been hundreds of crosswalks installed, and quite often you'll see granite curbing at the end of a crosswalk, which is obviously not handicap accessible. So our first priority was throughout the town trying to address the need for the wheelchair ramps. In addition to our second priority that we're also applying for was the need for a sidewalk on Millbury Street from Central Square to Bancroft Street. We actually witness it quite often, and you can see a trail that's actually worn down through the grass area on Millbury Street, actually on both sides of Central Square where people cross. And with Central Square being somewhat of a complicated intersection, we felt having a sidewalk along that stretch, and with the number of businesses in this area from Bancroft Street, it would be a good improvement for increasing and improving pedestrian activity in the area. So those are the two projects we are currently seeking approval from the board to apply for the grant, and if approved, to expend the funds. The total cost is $400,000. We would anticipate the majority of that money, probably 75% of it, would be to fund the wheelchair ramps throughout town. So probably somewhere in the order of $300,000, and then potentially $100,000 for the sidewalk construction. But the total grant value would be $400,000, and the grant application is due by November 2nd. I'd like to say Eilish Corey, the new senior civil engineer, has done a great job working on this grant and many other grants that we've been applying for. So I certainly want to commend her for all her work and the work that she'll do to complete this grant application. So I'd like to request the board's approval to apply for that grant. Thank you.
Doreen, you're muted. Hang on.
Yeah, no, thank you. Do any members have any comments or questions? Seeing none, is
No.
there a motion regarding the request?
Madam Chair, I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Carpenter.
I just had two, so through you to Mr. Coyle. Are any easements needed for the sidewalk on Millbury? And I know you mentioned in your letter about sidewalks, other sidewalks. Will that be announced as part of the pavement program sometime later in the year or early next year?
For clarification, Mr. Carpenter, you talk about additional sidewalks beyond this project?
You have in your, under 1 on your letter, you say phase 1 of the project will only include areas in which a ramp is necessary where there is not currently one. And you mentioned that 100,000 is going for the sidewalk on Millbury, correct?
Correct.
And 300 is for these other locations. I just didn't know if they were going to be announced as part of the paving program or if this was being treated totally separately.
Okay, so yes, this would be separate. We may, if we are approved for this grant for the funding, I would anticipate that we would design this in-house, and if the timing works out, we would include this in a roadway bid package so that we're able to get more competitive pricing. So I think the answer would be yes, if possible. If by chance the timing of this grant and the timing to expend the funds don't align with the roadway bid package, then we'd have to move separately. But our goal would be to try to combine them if possible. Yes.
And any easements needed on Millbury Street to fit the sidewalk in, or are we good?
I think we're good. I don't anticipate any easements. We have a fairly wide right-of-way in that area, so I think we should be okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on this? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion to authorize, accept, and expend grant funds from Mass DOT to complete the street funding program.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Carpenter is seconded by a roll call vote. Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren? And the chair votes yes. Thank you. The next item that we moved up that Mr. Coyle is also here for is a request for the board, a board vote to declare surplus equipment. Mr. Coyle.
Thank you. I believe I don't have this one in front of me, but I believe this was a 2006 pickup truck that we were looking to surplus. And if approved, we would add this to our list of equipment and vehicles that we would put out to auction.
Great, thank you. Do any members have any comments or questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve for the town to declare the 2006 Ford F-350 dump truck as surplus equipment for disposal purposes or to put for auction.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Berthium has made a motion. Mr. Liberty seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? By a roll call vote. Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, everyone. And I am going to ask
Thank
to
you.
move up one more item because I see Shannon Reagan is on the call as well. So maybe here for the tax increment financing policy. Is there a motion to move up agenda item 6A?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Mr. Berthium,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Liberty,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan, and the chair votes yes. I said yes. We are on the tabled item, discussion and vote on the tax increment financing policy.
Great. Through the chair, I want to point out that in your packet, you have the TIF policy with anything in red that was raised by any of the members at the last meeting for consideration of the board. I know you wanted to see what it looked like if those changes were made to the policy. So Shannon did a great job. She incorporated all those recommendations from the board member and put that in here. I want to point out that, and Shannon can answer any specific questions, but on the decertification revocation of a certified project, it is governed by Mass General Law. So it's actually it's under 402 CMR2. So that is in here as it appears in the Massachusetts regulations. So individual communities can add language in each TIF agreement if they want that would either trigger the project to be decertified or not, depending on whether they met their goals of job creation and reinvestment. So we thought it was best for the purposes of the policy to leave in here what the state requirements are for revoking or decertifying a project, because they're pretty specific. Shannon, did you have anything to add to that? Did I capture what you?
Yeah, you captured pretty much everything. I think that was the most significant change in addition, was just the decertification information.
So I know we've discussed this at a couple meetings. Are there any additional board comments or questions? Seeing none, are we interested in taking a vote tonight on the tax increment financing policy?
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we adopt the policy as revised tonight.
Second.
Is there a second? Mr. Carpenter made the motion. Mr. Berthium seconded the motion. Is there a discussion? Seeing no discussion, by a roll call vote, Mr. Berthium,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Liberty,
Yes. Yes. Excuse me.
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
For waiting.
Yep, thank you. And I just want to thank the board for your input. It made it a better document, so we look forward to moving forward and implementing it if we have the opportunity with a business in the future.
Yes.
And thanks, Shannon, for all your work on it. Great job.
Thank you, and thank you.
Shannon.
Thank you. Okay, going back to Board of Selectmen general items, we are on agenda item 4D, the annual vote on the schedule of fees and schedule of fines. We do need to take these as separate motions. Are there any questions or comments regarding the fine and fee schedules?
Through the chair, if I can say, so for our newer members, this is something that when we actually did a whole revamp of our general bylaws and administrative bylaws, it used to be that the fees used to have to be set by town meeting. And when we went and did that omnibus rewrite of all the bylaws, it had been recommended and town meeting approved of it, and we all discussed that it would be better to have the Board of Selectmen set them on an annual basis, because should Mass General Law change or any of these fees or fines change, we're not therefore required to go all the way back to town meeting and go through that whole process again. So this is just a much easier, more efficient process, and it gives the board the opportunity to review it on an annual basis. What you have in front of you, we put the date on it, would be effective today. I just want to point out there are no recommended changes this year. Nothing in the fees schedule or the fine schedule has changed under Mass General Law, nor do we recommend from a departmental standpoint changing anything. So it would be the same exact ones that we had from the last, I think, year. Last year, I think we changed one, but this year we have no recommended changes.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobson. Are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve the schedule of fees as presented?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the schedule of fees as presented in the order that they're displayed.
Is there a second? We have a second by Mr. Wren. By a roll call vote, Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. LaLiberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Is there a motion to approve the schedule of fines as presented?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the schedule of fines as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. LaLiberty. By a roll call vote, Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. LaLiberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Moving on, the next agenda item is an ABCC application for an amendment of or change of corporate name for the Auburn Webster Lodge number 2118. Enclosed are the application documents. Before we move on to this, I just want to make a disclosure that I am a member of the Auburn Webster Lodge 2118 and have no financial interest in this agenda item. So this is, although we received quite a packet, which is generally what we have from the ABCC, this appears to be a simple name change. Do any members have any comments or questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion to approve the name change.
Second.
Okay, by a roll call vote, Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. LaLiberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Moving on, we have no gift acceptance. In your packet, we have a request for a proclamation by Brian Deslinski, Assistant Scoutmaster of Boy Scout Troop 53, and he is making a request for Kieran Kearney, age 17, who has achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. For his project, he put together 36 cancer comfort bags for patients at the St. Vincent Hospital Infusion Center in Worcester. Are there any comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to authorize a proclamation for Eagle Scout Keeney.
I'll make a motion that we grant that request for a proclamation and thank him for what looks like a wonderful project. It was very helpful to those who received it.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. LaLiberty. By a roll call vote, Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. LaLiberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Moving on, agenda item 5A, which we've already taken care of, but I'll turn to the manager and ask if she has anything further on the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan.
Through the chair, I do not. I just want to remind everybody that it is on our website, and you can click onto the various links. And also, just to mention this, we're probably going to come back in with a recommendation maybe for 2021. It may be something to consider to set up a disability commission in town. We have never had one. And it's always recommended to have something like that. Now that we have the plan, I think it might be appropriate to have a disability commission to help us oversee the ongoing implementation of it. So that's something I want to consider and just wanted to mention it to the board. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And you have nothing else under town manager items that you wanted to address?
I do not. I just want to ask if Mr. Kazanovich had anything on this?
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I just want to raise one thing. I was just informed by our town treasurer that there was supposed to be a second vote taken by the board relative to the borrowing. So there was a vote that she said she sent over to the office to be on the agenda, but for whatever reason was not on the packet. I have the vote here that was sent to me. So I don't know whether or not the board can act on this vote tonight, or whether or not we would have to call a meeting in a couple of days and do a remote meeting just for this one item to get it voted to move the borrowing forward. This vote sets the useful life of school department equipment for a period of 5 years with a value of $200, and town equipment of $10,000 for a 5-year period for a set of bleachers. So I was going back and forth to try to call our financial advisor to see what our options are. I don't know how the board would feel about taking action on this vote. There was an agenda item relative to this borrowing, although it would fall under that as a separate item, but it wasn't listed on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich. I'm just looking at the agenda and reading the language. Certainly, this isn't anything that we want to come back on us. Could you read the motion that that the treasurer has requested? I just want to hear it one more time.
It's pretty lengthy. So it's a vote of the Board of Selectmen. I, the clerk of the Board of Selectmen of the town of Auburn, Massachusetts, certify at a meeting on the board held October 26, 2020, of which meeting all members of the board were duly notified and at which a quorum was present. The following vote was unanimously passed by at least 3 affirmative votes, all of which appears upon the official record of the board in my custody. Voted that the maximum useful life of the departmental equipment listed below to be financed with the $210,000 portion of the $720,000 borrowing authorized by the vote of the town passed June 2nd, 2020, Article 4, is hereby determined pursuant to GL Chapter 44, Section 7, Subsection 1, to be as follows. System tech furniture equipment, $200,000, maximum useful life 5 years. Bleachers, $10,000, maximum useful life 5 years. I further certify that the vote was taken at the meeting open to the public, that the vote was not taken by secret ballot, at a notice stating the place, date, time, and agenda for the meeting, which agenda included the adoption of the above vote, was filed with the town clerk, and a copy thereof posted in a manner conspicuously visible to the public at all hours in or in the municipal building that the officer of the town clerk is located, or, if applicable, in accordance with the alternative method of notice prescribed or approved by the Attorney General as set forth in 940 CMR 29.32 subsection 2B, at least 48 hours, not including Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays, prior to the time of the meeting, and remain so posted at the time of the meeting that no deliberations or decisions in connection with the subject matter of this vote were taken in executive session, all in accordance with General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18 through 25, as amended. Dated, and that's where it's signed by the board.
Thank you. Having heard the language in the full vote, and this is a serious matter. I mean, we don't want to have any issues, especially with this incredible interest rate. I would ask board members, put it out there, if board members are available for a one-item agenda item on Thursday, we can discuss this, and we would need 3 members for a quorum, and we could post that meeting first thing tomorrow. I'll open it up to board members to see their availability for this Thursday, be it a 5 or 6 p.m. meeting. Do members have?
I would be available at 6.
Mr. Wren, I didn't hear your comment.
I can make that work.
I'll be available.
Mr. Carpenter?
I would prefer if we could meet earlier than 6, but I don't certainly want to exclude any board members. But you only need 3 votes, and it looks like you got 4, or 4 members available. So schedule it for the convenience of the board members.
I could possibly do 5. It might just be off of my phone instead of a computer. If that works for everybody.
Mr. Berthium, it would just be that one agenda item. Mr. Carpenter, would 5 p.m. work for you?
That would be fine, yes. That would work out better for me.
Okay. So we will post a meeting for this agenda item with this specific language for Thursday at 5 p.m. Sharon will send us a link to log on, and this will be the only agenda item. Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich, for bringing that to our attention.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Madam Chair.
Thursday the 29th, correct?
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
That's this Thursday the 29th, just so I can put on the calendar for Mike and I?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So we were wrapping up town manager items. Having addressed that, is there anything further on town manager items?
Madam Chair, before we move on, just wondering, are we still able to sign the documents tomorrow with the town clerk, or are we also pushing that until after our next vote on Thursday?
Mr. Kazanovich?
Let me get clarification on that from our financial advisor. I don't want to jeopardize anything, so we'll get the word out to you as soon as we hear from Unibank.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question, Mr. Liberty. Thank you. If there's nothing else on town manager items, we've taken care of the tabled items. Although nothing has been sent in, do we have any member items? Anything anyone has? Seeing none, we have the Board of Selectmen minutes from September 28th, 2020. Are there any corrections or omissions? Seeing none, Sharon, those were rather lengthy. Great job as always. The chair will accept them as presented. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Carpenter's made the motion. Mr. Liberty has seconded by a roll call vote. Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. See you all on Thursday at 5. Thank you, everyone.